Hi, this is Sam Frick, and welcome back to the ANEC's coverage of the football sectional playoffs. I am the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner, covering 30 schools across Northeast Indiana and parts of Elkhart County. That includes the ACAC, the NECC, and the Northeast 8s. We continue with Class 1A, and now we shift over to 1A sectional number 43. We have a couple schools in that sectional represent the NEC, and that's Southern Wells and Fremont. Southern Wells will be quite short, all due respect to Southern Wells, but they are not good this year. They are 0-9. They do have the bye, so they'll be traveling to Southwood or Triton, but in all due respect, Southern Wells may have one of the worst teams they've ever fielded. I'm trying to find nice words for Southern Wells this year, unlike their volleyball team, however. Unlike the basketball team, maybe. The football team just leaves a lot to be desired. I feel really bad for Blake Blaker on this Southern Wells team. Only averaging 3.6 points per game. They're giving up 53 points per game. They have been shut out 5 times. Yeah, this is gonna be a very short postseason for Southern Wells. All due respect, even if Southwood would be the matchup, it's like no, Southwood's better than Southern Wells in general. So I think we look at this sectional. I think we have to begin with Southwood versus Triton. Triton is the host of that particular matchup against Southwood. And you look at Triton's record, 6-3 in the season, averaging 26 points per game, only giving up 14 points under 16th year head coach Rodney Jonas. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he's been around this block many times over the years. In fact, he just came back to Triton after a 1-year stint under Zach Whitaker. So Zach Whitaker was the head coach to start the season at Triton. Whitaker was let go mid-season, so now Rodney Eunice is back at Triton, and that's why he's the coach now at Triton. You look at the record in general. I mean, they beat LaVille 27-6. I think that's decent. Lost to Bremen 21-3 on the road. Bremen's not a bad team. They beat Culver. They beat South Central Union Mills. Winnemat, not the greatest teams in the world. Got shut out by North Judson, but all due respect, North Judson's a really good football team. Probably maybe the favorites to even win the 1A state championship, considering that there's no Adams Central and no Indianapolis Lutheran. North Judson has to feel really good about those chances. They shut out Caston. They did beat Pioneer by 7 points, which is pretty impressive considering Pioneer's history of success in football, which we have to state that anytime we talk about Pioneer, the Pioneer Panthers. They are 6-3, so Pioneer is still pretty good, but not at the level that they once were maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And they did lose to North Miami by 8 points. North Miami has looked much better this year in their first year in the Hoosier North Conference compared to where they were in their final year in the TRC. We'll talk about North Miami shortly. But you look at Triton, obviously this is going to be a team that's going to rely on their defense. They do have a couple shutouts to their name this year for the boys in Bourbon, Indiana. Triton's a team that's going to be known for its defense. And I think we talked about the Triton Trojans. Defense is going to be the name of the game. And like a lot of teams in 1A, they're a team that's going to also rely on their ability to, let's just be honest, run the football is going to be the number one thing at Triton. And when we talked about the Triton Trojans, we got to talk about number 3 for Triton. That's Jaden Overmeyer, the junior free safety and running back for Triton. He's definitely a playmaker on this Triton team both ways, averaging 7.4 yards per carry. He also is a pretty strong contributor on the defense side of the ball. He does have at least 2 interceptions on the season, although they've only posted 6 games, so they don't tell you the full stats at Triton. But you can tell right away that they are a team that definitely has some athletes for a 1A school. Their defense is pretty solid, but they don't have a lot of players that like really just wow you on the offense side of the ball. So they are a team that that can be beatable if they're not able to generate their offense and whatnot. Defensively, a little more talent on that side of the football, led by number 59 for them, at least up front, and that's Isaiah Lemler, the defensive end for Triton, with I believe 7 TFLs on the season, at least 7 TFLs, because remember, they don't tell you the full stats. And then you also have number 52 for them, and that's the junior Colton Reynolds, their inside linebacker. He also plays guard on the Triton offensive line. So, again, like a lot of 1A schools, a lot of players playing both ways in Class 1A for Triton. definitely going to be an intriguing matchup for the Southwood Knights, a team that is winless on this season, and winless because of that they just haven't been able to close out games. We'll talk about Southwood in a matter of moments. Another player to watch is Wayne Reichert, the senior outside linebacker for Triton. He has at least four interceptions on the season for Triton. Now we shift over to Southwood. They are winless, but they are winless. At least they're winless with fights. And that's the one thing I talk about with Southwood is they are playing hard. They're just not winning football games. And that's the thing about Southwood that's really intriguing under first-year head coach Thomas Tyree. He did come from Northside as an assistant, as a coordinator on the defensive side of the football, I should say. And so he does have experience playing against big competition. Obviously, this is a transition year for Southwood, kind of a rebuilding season for them. But they do have guys that can make plays. And you look at their junior quarterback at Southwood, that is Griffin Chambers. He is a playmaker on this team. That's one thing that Triton doesn't have, is they don't have a quarterback that can make plays with his arm and his legs. And that's something Griffin Chambers is capable of doing because of that playmaking ability. He does have 289 rushing yards, 932 passing, 8 TD passes. He does have 6 picks, however, so that's something to keep an eye on. Is can he limit the turnovers? I think that's one thing to keep an eye on for Southwood. They do run 2 quarterbacks at Southwood because they have a freshman by the name of Eli Shellhammer, number 3 for Southwood. He also is their wide receiver when he's not playing quarterback. So they do have some playmakers in the quarterback position. They do have a running back in junior number 11, and that is Mannix Marshall. He also plays on the basketball team as a guard. Mannix Marshall is a solid athlete on a team. And remember, for a team that's 0-9, Southwood does have pretty good players. They just got to win football games. That's just the big problem with Southwood. They just haven't win games. Wide receiver wise, you look at one guy that could really make a difference on this team. Actually, there's 3 guys that can make a difference for them. We start off with number 2 for Southwood. That's Owen Enyart for the Southwood Knights, the strong safety and slot back for Southwood, a junior. He's been their leader with averaging 55 receiving yards per game. He is averaging 9.8 yards per catch, 4 TDs on the season for him. They also have another receiver named of Cole Holloway. He's a guy that can make plays with limited volume. Emery Liddick hasn't seen a lot of receptions this year, but he's a guy that can take off as well. So when they do get the ball to their hands, Southwood has been able to be a threat on the passing game. Again, it just comes down to limiting the turnovers. Seems to be the big concern, at least on the offensive side of the football, has been the turnovers. Turnovers have been an issue at times this year. But I think when you look at the defensive side of the football, they are giving up 31 points per game. So they have had trouble stopping people, at least, but again, not with a lack of effort per se, but definitely some errors, no less, on the defense side of the football. But obviously, when you look at the defense, some of the bright spots on that team, Ivan Rank is their leader on the defensive side with 124 tackles on the season for Southwood. Again, we talked about Anya earlier. He's a guy that's going to be involved in the defense of the ball. Again, going back to Marshall, he's another guy that can get some plays as well with 90 tackles. The thing with Southwood is they just have not been able to get after the quarterback. And I think that's the thing about Southwood, is just not being able to finish plays. Seems to be the big concern with Southwood. Against Mannix Marshall, who also can make plays on defense. He's got 3 interceptions on the season on the defensive side of the football. But look at the record, 0-9 for Southwood. And you looked at the record in terms of games decided by 2 scores or less. Southwood, I mean, let's look at this. Like 5 of their losses have come by 14 points or fewer. That's how good Southwood can be when they're finishing games. And that's been the issue for Southwood this year, is not finishing games. So if they can do this in the playoffs, you're going to see a much different Southwood team in the sectional, at least to make a run for a sectional championship. I don't know if they're going to win sectionals per se, but they're certainly going to have an opportunity to do so. I don't think Triton is unbeatable by any means. And the winner of that game is certainly going to make it to the finals, like in this sectional, because Southern Wells is not good this year. They are terrible. So the winner of this game is going to have, based on almost as close to a free pass to the sectional finals as you're going to get. You're not going to say that very often when it comes to high school sports. Blackhawk Christian against North Miami. Blackhawk in their second year of 11-man football. It's been a long process for Bryce Bennett's team. They are trying. They're slowly improving. But Blackhawk Christian is not ready yet. In fact, this is their first ever postseason for the Blackhawk Christian Braves since becoming a full-fledged varsity roster. They start off 8-man ball, and now they're 11-man ball. So it's going to be a first learning experience for the Blackhawk Christian Braves. They're a hardworking team. They play hard, but North Miami is a pretty good ball club. They're only giving up 19 points per game. They're actually winning their last 4 games, so they're actually playing their best football at the right time for Joe Grant's North Miami Warriors, the former member of the TRC, now a member of the Hoosier North Conference. And when you look at North Miami, defense, again, like Trident, is a big factor of North Miami's success. They're also a team that relies very heavily on running the football. This is a team that's recorded 3,029 yards rushing on the season. That is 7.1 yards per carry. And anytime you have an offense like that at North Miami that can contribute and score at the level that they are, those are the type of teams that are really hard to play against this time of year. And that's one thing that stands out to me about North Miami is their ability to run the football. So that means they have a really strong offensive line. That means they're playing disciplined football and whatnot. And those type of teams, again, are going to be tough teams to play against whenever you play a team like North Miami that can run the football. They got all conference linemen on this team, so you know they're going to be talented up front. They got some good boys up front, at least for a 1A school of that magnitude. And the one thing that they've done much better of, at least compared to last year, has been their ability to cut down the turnovers. I believe they lost 19 fumbles last year, at least according to my lovely resource from the Indiana Football Digest. So that's something that they have definitely been working on this year, is being able to take care of the football. And this Warrior bone offense, so it's essentially a wishbone offense that North Miami runs, and that's why they run the ball so effectively. So it's kind of a light version of what we've seen from Warsaw and Mishawaka over the years. So I think that's one thing to keep an eye on for North Miami, is that ability to run the ball. The offensive line is going to play a big factor for North Miami's ability to win the sectional and whatnot. So they have 4 guys with 600 or more rushing yards at North Miami, and all 4 of those guys are capable of producing for the Warriors. The first one being Ryan Meredith. Ryan Meredith is basically a 3-sport athlete, and that's a guy that's definitely been a playmaker on this team as well. They have their quarterback in Hartley Hoover, who essentially is an extension to that running game as a quarterback. He does not throw the ball very much at all. He is essentially a run-first quarterback. He's a guy that can make some plays. He also has 9 touchdowns, just like Meredith. That's one thing interesting there. They have number 5 at North Miami, and that is Lake Musal. He has 8 touchdowns on the ground this year for them. So you look at North Miami, very balanced offense in general for this team. And then you got another guy by the name of their number is number 22. That is Cody Wan. So they got some upperclassmen on this team with experience. They got some leadership on this team. Very strong offensive line, as you could see here. Again, they've only been shut out once this year. That came against North Judson, which, let's be honest, North Judson is probably the favorites to win state, possibly in Class 1A. I mean, look at this. North Judson has, 4 shutouts this year. They've only given up double figures twice this year. Like, I'm not going to lose my sleep over that if I'm North Miami, because of just how good this North Judson team is this year. But I think the one thing that I would be concerned about if I'm Fremont, because I think Fremont has a chance to play North Miami in the second round, is can Fremont stop this they call Warrior Bone offense, but it's essentially a wishbone offense. And that would be the one thing that worries me right now if Fremont were to play North Miami in the second round. Defensively, obviously there's one guy that really stands out on that defensive front. That is number 52, Jordan Simon. He leads the way with 91 tackles on the season for them, 10.1 tackles per game. Hartley Hoover does have a sack, which Hoover does play free safety. Braylon McIntyre has 4 interceptions on the season, so North Miami does have the ability to force turnovers when they have to. Harley Hoover kind of does a little bit of everything for that team as well. So that's the thing that makes North Miami very interesting. They're going to be heavy favorites this week against Blackhawk Christian. I mean, Blackhawk's going to have a tough time beating this North Miami team, no less. And then you look at that last matchup, and obviously with me covering Fremont, I know a little bit more about the Fremont Eagles, although I am a little more limited on Fremont football compared to other sports, just because I don't have all the resources with Fremont football in general. But Fremont, pretty scrappy team. They are a hard-nosed team. Again, I've talked about this in the past with Fremont, but they are a team that's pretty much Jekyll and Hyde offensively. They're either really, really explosive offensively, or they are ice cold. I mean, Fremont has been shut out 3 times this year. They've only scored double figures 3 times, and let's be honest, Blackhawk Christian, not anything special. Part Tudor this year, nothing that special about Part Tudor. I mean, Part Tudor 6-3, but I do have my question marks about Part Tudor's strength of schedule this year. And then Central Noble's a winless team. They're not good either. So I don't know just how good Fremont really matches up with the rest, but I will say this with Fremont. They do have a quarterback by the name of number 3, Trace Handshoe. He's a pretty solid quarterback. He can be pretty good when he's on a roll. He's also can play corner at Fremont. Again, their defense at Fremont is pretty strong. So they can play some good defense. Cole Armstrong is another solid player on this team. They have Jackson Foster, their tackle defensive end. Pretty solid player on the defensive side of the ball, especially up front. They got Jonah Pentecost, who's their center and defensive end. Again, another really solid player up front for the Fremont Eagles. Brent Bressler. And then obviously they got the junior playmaker, Carmi Moreno. He has been their guy. He's been the guy as running back, tight end, wide receiver. He's pretty much been their offensive guy this entire season. So if the Fremont Eagles are going to have a chance to be successful in this state tournament, they're going to need Carmi Moreno to have a really strong postseason. And they're going to at least have a chance against Northfield. Northfield, again, kind of like Southwood. I don't think the record is as bad as people think. They do have some potential, although they're not as explosive on paper as, say, Southwood, I would argue, it has a little more talent than Northfield. Not by much. Northfield does have some decent players as well, but Northfield, I would argue, is maybe a little more consistent on the defensive side of the football, which is why they're 3-6. You look at their record, they lost badly to North Miami, they lost by 3 to Lewis Cass, lost badly to Maconaquah by 36 points. Maconaquah, by the way, I believe just won the Three Rivers Conference. Yeah, they just won the Three Rivers Conference for the first time ever. So Maconaquah is definitely for real. They beat Southwood by a single point. It came down to the last play, one of the last plays of the game. Lost to Manchester in overtime 20-14. They beat Wabash. Lost to Rochester by 35. Beat Whitco. And then they also lost to Northwestern. Pretty solid Northwestern team. No less. You look at this Northfield team. They don't throw the ball as much as Southwood does. They do have a pretty balanced rushing attack for this North team. You look at Northfield in general in terms of their leaders. You got Jake Perney averaging Jared Holmes averaging 46 rushing yards. Jake Perney averaging 44 rushing yards. Carter Rogers. Pretty balanced offense in general. Nothing overly special, but they get the job done. I think that's the one thing about Northfield that does a pretty unique job. They also run a lot of clock. They're averaging 5.6 yards per carry, so they're a team that's going to try to grind clock and control the line of scrimmage, and that's one thing that Fremont's going to have to take note of when you're playing against Northfield, is they're going to have to be able to get some stops defensively and take the ball out of their hands a little bit, because of that Northfield can run down some clock, especially if Northfield can build a lead early. I think that could be a cause of concern for the Fremont Eagles, but they are prone for some mistakes. They are prone to have mistakes. They are prone to have their dry spells, just like Fremont, although not to the level of Fremont. They have been a little turnover prone, about 9 picks this season, 7 lost fumbles. They are a little bit turnover happy for my liking. But I would say you look at this Northfield team, obviously they're going to be a team that's going to have an opportunity to win games just because they are a hard-nosed team. They are going to be a team that's going to be predicated on being a scrappy team to play against. I looked at a guy on defense, number 3, Cameron Pratt's another one that stands out to me with over 100 tackles on the season. So Northfield's a solid team. I think this game could go either way for me. But in general, it's with Fremont, it's just going to come down to, can Carmi Marino do what he can do best? Can Trace Handshoot Carmi Marino get some offensive momentum? I think that's really the question I have with Fremont. Because like I said, with Fremont's offense, they're feast and famine for me. And I think that type of offense, it can make it very dangerous for opposing teams to figure out what Fremont team we're going to see. But at the same time, you do have to wonder what Fremont offense are we going to see on the field. And that's the one thing that does give me a little bit of concern for the Fremont Eagles. But they do have a chance. I think Fremont can definitely win this game. But because I think they're a better defensive team than Northfield. But I just don't know about the offense. I think that's the one thing that does give me a little bit of concern. I'm not going to even pick this game right now. That's such a tough matchup. I like North Miami to come out of that bracket. I'll take North Miami to play for the sectional finals. And then, you know what? Just for the heck of it, let's go Southwood. I'm not a big fan of Trident. I think Trident's going the wrong direction right now and going to the playoffs. I'll take Southwood to go and play in the sectional finals. And overall, I think North Miami is a little bit more dangerous than everybody else. I think the Warriors' offensive scheme is a bit of a headache for teams in 1A to play against. That type of offense is hard to prepare for. So I think the Warrior Bone offense, I think, gets it done. I think North Miami wins the sectional.